Hi everyone, welcome to another video. I'm Nora Nakar, and today is another day in which I'm going to talk about the books that I have read until now for my Around the World in 80 Books project. And I'm going to focus in this video, as you can see in the title. I don't know why I always explain it, because the title says what I'm going to do. Anyway, the books that were set in the Middle East. I only own one of them, so there's going to be a lot of pictures going on. But let's start with the book that I read for Turkey, which is The Bastard of Istanbul by Elif Shafak. This book is about the Gazanti family, and in this family there is a curse on the men, and they all die in mysterious ways before their 40th birthday. We mainly follow Asia, a young girl, as she mostly hangs out with her friends at a hip Turkish cafe. Asia lives with her mother and her two aunts. Her mother is rebellious, has a tattoo parlor, and is called Zahila. We also have Aunt Bahu, who is a clairvoyant and converses with demons and kind of learns about stuff that happened in the family. And the second aunt, is Feride, who is a complete hypochondriac. And these three women also have a brother who moved to the US and got a child there who is called Anusha. And Anusha, when she becomes older, wants to learn about her Armenian family, so she decides to get in contact with Asia and ends up going to Istanbul to learn about her family. And when she is in Istanbul, some family secrets get divulged. This was a lovely book. I really liked the writing. The characters are wonderfully flawed. The plot was very nice. And the book really gave me an idea of what current day life in a cosmopolitan city like Istanbul is like, and how the different cultures that live there cohabit. There were also many descriptions of food in this book, which really made me want to go to a Turkish restaurant and enjoy all of those flavors. I would recommend you reading this book if you want to read about Turkey, but want something that is modern and has a nice plot to it. And then we've got the book that I've read for Syria, which I've already talked about in a previous video, and is We Crossed a Bridge and It Trembled by Wendy Pearlman. Wendy Pearlman is not Syrian herself, but what she did is that she interviewed many Syrian refugees mostly, and she collected all of these stories in this book, and it's a non-fiction that explains the recent history of Syria. It talks about life under the previous leader, the current one, the Arab Spring, the rise of ISIS, and the refugees needing to flee for their lives. It's a very, very good and marvelous book that really makes you feel the anger and the fear and the hopelessness of all of these different peoples. All of the voices in the book really add up, and it really hits you over here. I highly recommend you reading it. It really makes you understand the refugee problematic under a totally different light. Then we have got Azerbaijan, which is over here, and honestly I didn't know where Azerbaijan lay before I dipped my toes a little bit more into this book. And for Azerbaijan I read the book called Ali and Nino. To a certain extent it's a kind of retelling of Romeo and Juliet, but in Azerbaijan at the beginning of the 20th century. But the book is so much more than a romance. It's the story of Ali and Nino, obviously, but Ali is a young Muslim boy from an aristocratic family, and he falls in love with Nino, who is a girl who goes to his school, or goes to the school next to his school, something like that. And Nino is a Georgian princess. So both have completely different backgrounds, and backgrounds that don't really match. And their families are not necessarily enthusiastic, especially Nino's parents. And all of this is set in Baku, which is a city where all of these different cultures met. We had the Christian culture, the Armenians, the Muslims, the Turks, the Russians, and as this is set in the beginning of the 20th century, you can imagine that when the First World War started pointing its nose, that the atmosphere in Baku evolved slightly. Ali also has to fight in the army. So next to their romance and the family clash, there is also this historical background. Now, I knew next to nothing about Azerbaijan, and I learned a lot through reading this book about the culture especially. What I really liked is that the characters often reference poems, and many countries in the Middle East have this rich culture of poetry that reading in another language you can't possibly grasp. But by reading this, I did get sort of appreciation for it. And it's a weird book because on the one hand we have an epic horse chase when Ali has to kidnap Nino to make sure that she becomes his wife. And then we have the poetry that also gives another level to it, and we have the historical backgrounds. So it is a rich book, and I haven't heard anybody else talk about it, although I did really enjoy it. And while I was preparing this video, I read a little bit more about the author, which turned out to be a very interesting person as well. The author of this book is Kurban Said, but it turns out that that is the nom de plume of, let me check what his name is, Lev Nusimbao. And Lev is originally Jewish, and he was born in Kiev in Ukraine, but when he was young he moved to Baku in Azerbaijan and spent most of his childhood there. But when the Bolsheviks in 1920 or so, I think, attacked Baku, he and his family fled, and they fled to Germany when Lev was 14. When he was in Germany, when he was 18, he actually converted to the Islam. But that's not all. The plot thickens. He was a immensely prolific writer. He wrote in many different languages and also in German under another nom de plume. And his editor actually told him, hey, maybe you should take a break between books, at least a break of 1 year, because otherwise people will start to get a little bit nervous about how many books you're writing. And before and during the Second World War, the Nazis actually really liked his book and said it was prime German literature. Imagine their faces when they realized this person was actually of Jewish descent. So Lev had to flee Germany and to Italy, and he died very young when he was 36 from the Burgess disease, which is apparently a disease that many Jewish men die from. And it's very possible that if he had not denied his Jewish descent, he might have actually survived that. Now, the Wikipedia page did not say whether he denied his Jewish descent because he had converted to the Islam and was Muslim, or because it was World War II and you didn't talk about being Jewish at the time. Anyway, he's a fascinating man. I'm sorry if this didn't interest you, but now you know. Next, another book that I don't own is the book that I read for Afghanistan, which is, as you can imagine, a book by Khaled Housseini, and I picked The Kite Runner, although I've read all of his books. It's a well-known and heartbreaking book, and which was also turned into a movie. The narrator is a young boy who lives in Kabul, and he is friends with the son of the servant of his father, and they both join a kiting competition in which they are in the same team but have a different role. And something happens during that kiting competition, and the relationship between these two boys evolves. And the book spans a couple of decades, and we still follow this boy when he moves to the US, and it also follows him when he goes back to Afghanistan to look for his childhood friend. Now, the book is about redemption, it's about friendship, it's about family, and the background of Kabul and what was happening at that time shines through very naturally. It's a wonderfully written book. It's heartbreaking. There is, I have to say, some rape and pedophilia and some torturous death, so it's not necessarily a book that everybody will enjoy. I remember I was listening to this while at work, and I had to kind of take a break at one point, but I still highly recommend it. It's beautiful. I really want to get all of the books by Khaled Housseini in matching English editions, because now I don't have The Kite Runner. I have A Thousand Splendid Suns in French, and I have From the Mountains Comes the Echo or something like that. I have that one in Dutch, so I really want them in matching editions, and I highly recommend you reading The Kite Runner or any of Khaled Housseini's other books. A book that I did not get along with quite as much is the one that I read for Oman, and that is Celestial Bodies by Jokha Alharti, and it's the book that won the International Booker Prize last year. It's set in a small village in Oman, and we meet many characters, but mostly three sisters. We have Maya, who, after she had her heart broken, ends up marrying Abdullah. We have her sister Asma, who only marries a man because she feels that it's her duty to marry. And then we have Kuala, who is a very dreamy young girl and who only wants to marry the love of her life, so keeps waiting and waiting and waiting. And she ends up emigrating to Canada. And one of the other two sisters also moves to a nearby city and starts to learn how to read and really wants a different upbringing for her sons. To be honest, I don't really remember a lot from this book, and I found it quite difficult to get into. The writing was very light, it felt like a shadow all of the time. It was difficult to grasp. The narrative jumps through time, jumps through space, and changes point of view regularly, so that didn't help. But the book does show an evolution in life in Oman and the Oman society because, for example, at the beginning of the book, in the village there is still the use of slaves, and that is very normal. But we see the society evolving from that, and even a woman being allowed to learn how to read. So that was kind of interesting, but I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it for everybody because of this very light writing style. Last but not least, we have the book that I've read for Yemen, which is Black Mamba by Nadifa Mohammed. This book is about a young boy called Yama, and he lives in the streets of Aden, the capital of Yemen. And when his mother dies, he decides to leave the city and go search for his father. And Yama, as part of a tribe, is all over Eastern Africa, and by using that network, he learns rumors about what his father is doing and where his father is. So he follows that trail, and he's always a couple of days or a couple of weeks behind his father. But that trip lasts a couple of years, and he goes from, let me show you where's Yemen. From Yemen, he goes to Djibouti, and then through Ethiopia, through South Sudan, I believe, even through Sudan. He goes to Egypt. He also, I think, he finds his way to Israel, and then he goes back to Sudan. It is an epic tale, and we learn a lot about what is going on in these different countries. So he does also join an army of boy soldiers at one point, and friends that he makes also die in awful circumstances. So there's a lot going on, and it was fascinating to read. And what I found most fascinating is the role that his tribe, his clan, played, because wherever he went, he would somehow find a person from his clan who could help him further. Found it so obvious that they would help him. They would find this boy or young man later on in the story, and whatever their own situation was, even if they didn't have food, they would do everything they could to help him. It was so obvious that they would do that. And it felt different somehow to how we do that here with family and friends. I mean, if something happens, obviously family and friends are there to help. But it feels less matter-of-factly than what it was for this young boy in Eastern Africa. So it was interesting to see this very different dynamic. Now, I didn't love the book enough to keep it, and I don't really remember why. I think it's because I felt kind of disconnected to Yama somehow. A lot of stuff happens to him, but he seems somehow a bit disconnected to it. He does suffer, but not in a way that I could relate somehow. But it's still a good book, and I would recommend it if you want to learn about a young boy growing up and traveling through Eastern Africa. So I don't know if you counted, but those were 6 books apparently that I've read until now that are set in the Middle East. So I still have more to look forward to. I have some options for Iran. I've been wanting to read, what's it called? Reading Lolita in Tehran for a very long time, and I can't remember if I ordered it from the library or not, but I am still planning on picking that one up, and for the rest I don't have any fixed plans. So as always, I'm up for recommendations. Tell me if you've read any of these books. Also, I've been wanting to read more by Elif Shafak, who was the writer of The Bastard of Istanbul, because I really liked her writing. It felt very modern and easy. And I think the ones that I now had my eyes on were The Architect's Apprentice and The Three Daughters of Eve, but I don't know anything about them. So if you've read any other books by Elif Shafak that you can recommend, please tell me. That's it for now. I'm probably going to talk about the books that I have read that are set in Asia in the next of these series. Thank you for watching.